Well, it's just hit 4 o'clock, and I can see there's quite a few people here. So why don't we start promptly? Um, Firstly, a big thank you for joining us. I'll just make sure you all know you're on the right webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to supercharge the innovation in your organisation by deploying a really effective idea management process. So, if that's not what you thought you signed up to, happy for you to drop off now. Otherwise, it might be quite interesting. Just quickly, I'm Charlie DeRussa. I'm the founder of IdeaDrop, and always a pleasure, Johnny, to have you with me. Quick intro from you.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm Johnny Fisher. I'm one of the co-founders of IdeaDrop, and here today just to go through with Charlie the agenda. So I will kick you off and tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be covering. So we're going to talk a bit about the what, who, and why, and obviously what it is that we're talking about. We'll get into who is the people that it impacts, and largely actually it impacts everyone, but why it's important and why those different relationships and different nuances on how they come through and transpire. When we talk about big problems and barriers to innovation, so a really, really interesting part that Charlie will take you through, just understanding some of the challenges that we see other organisations face, and we'll hopefully look at some parity within your business and actually how we overcome those innovation barriers and tips and techniques to do that. I think for me, most importantly, talking about the strategies that drive your innovation impact plan, and that's really what today is about, which is about supercharging that innovation impact. And that's probably the most complex part within this type of process. So it's not just about technology, it's really around people and process that sit within your business and how they help you achieve that. We want to wrap that up with looking at some case studies and success stories of organizations that we've worked with. So what's the real life practical application of process, of technology, and combining those, and what should you expect to get out the other side. So that's sort of a high-level overview. I'm going to pass back to Charlie. He's going to talk a little bit more around the importance of ideas.
So just to kick off, it's obvious, but it's worth remembering that ideas are literally all around us. We touch them every day, we talk about them every day, we might even smell or eat them, but effectively, the world is full of ideas that we utilize in our everyday lives. Now, I want to illuminate this and set some context to today's session. So I thought that we would look at transportation as a form of innovation. So around 4,000 years ago, our ancestors decided to domesticate horses to create a form of traveling around more easily. It had a massive effect on the world, and even to this day, they are still used for that purpose. However, quite quickly, our ancestors started to see the need and had a desire to improve the horse as a transportation method. Now, this probably was because they started to unearth problems with it as a form of transportation. For instance, it can only fit a certain number of passengers or bear a certain load. And therefore, some very clever people invented the wheel. Now, the wheel obviously allowed us to carry larger loads over longer distances and ensured that the horses used less energy. And now, there were lots of other innovations and iterations to those innovations around transportation up until the 19th century. But in the 19th century, we almost accelerate with how we start to perceive travel and our needs for it. And so, fascinatingly, the bus was actually first deployed in the early 19th century, and the automobile towards the end of that century. Now, as I look at this slide, you're probably thinking, that looks like a BMW X5, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't out in 1886. I think that when we were putting the slide deck together, there wasn't a nice silhouette of an old car there, so you have to forgive us. We actually get into the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, and we make a massive, massive step up in our ability to travel. We suddenly understand how to utilize flight, and the world opens up to us as humans. And then here we are today, and the next most topical innovation within transportation is now EV, electric vehicles, where of course you would have heard of Tesla and the incredible things that they are doing in pioneering this form of transportation. They're looking at autonomous vehicles, extending what we ever imagined a battery could do, so on and so forth. But this whole slide here and the one before is really to emphasize to you guys how innately human it is to innovate. And so at the front end of an idea process, we have to have engagement. So I want to encourage you with some really good news. You won't have a shortage of ideas because it's innately human to have those ideas. So we just need to help design a process that extracts those ideas that already exist. For me, no webinar is ever complete without a takeaway. If you give up an hour of your time and there aren't key takeaways, then it's been a pointless exercise. So what we really want to equip you with today are insights on key activities that we deploy in enterprise organizations in order to effectively put a supercharger unit in front of their idea engine. Sounds very cool, doesn't it? So now we better tell you how we do that, otherwise we'll fail on the takeaway.
Thanks, Charlie. So just before we get into some of the tips and techniques, just want to really sort of put the definition out there as to what idea management is, and just reading from the screen, and then I'll elaborate. So idea management is a formalized, structured routine for generating, capturing, organizing, evaluating, and implementing innovation that will drive your business forward. Bit of a long explanation, and very simply put, idea management is about creating a process that will allow an idea go from flash to bang. And what's really, really important is those ideas will be different. They'll be different in each organization, they'll be different in each department, they'll follow different processes and different pathways. And that's where innovation management becomes quite interesting and slightly more complex, because it's not just about the idea itself, it's about the different multitudes of places that it can go and how it impacts and what it means. And we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go through. So I'm going to move on to talking a little bit more about the benefits of idea management. Now that we understand what it is, what does it do, and then we can really get into sort of understanding how it's going to help you within your organization and within your role. So we're going to talk a little bit about who benefits from idea management. And as you can kind of see from the infographic, lots of different people, whether those are employees, whether they're members of the public, whether they're shareholders, or whether they're customers, and of course, operational divisions within our organization. What's really interesting is ideas, as we've already touched upon, are everywhere, and they impact different people in different ways. So I was to look at the marketing department as an example. How does what ideas a marketing department mean? Well, it could be to fine-tune their existing output, help them identify new channels, access ideas for new campaigns. But ultimately, what's the point? And it's really to generate leads and increase revenue. So ideas are one thing, but it's the action of the ideas to produce the output that is what we really want. And that's what idea management's really around. Could be a product team. So how do we access suggestions for new features or improvements that will help us outperform the competition? Again, we constantly need to be innovating and iterating what we do in order to stay ahead. From a finance perspective, how can we help improve their forecasting and asset allocation, increase efficiencies, identify cost-saving opportunities? Finance will have, like other industry or like other departmental divisions within your business, will have key objectives that they're trying to achieve, and that's what we want to drive ideas around. If we can drive ideas into the right parts of the business in the right way at the right time, that's where they'll have the most impact, and they need to be funneled. HR department, how do you boost employee morale, increase employee engagement, and improve an outdated process? All really important. It affects everyone within the organization, but under different guises. So I'm going to talk a little bit more around what idea management is and why idea management is important. And we've touched upon how it affects the different organizations or different parts of the organization and different people, but we're going to talk a little bit more broadly. So reading again from the slide, one thing to have a great idea, but it's another thing to bring it to life. For innovation to thrive, you need an ecosystem that can transform an idea into something truly meaningful. So what does that mean? And Charlie touched upon a little bit earlier with saying it's intrinsically human to have and act on ideas. Your ideas can be chaotic, they can be random, they're personal. It's based on so many different factors. It can be our upbringing, our backgrounds, our education, our jobs, our friends. In order to extract the value from those ideas, we need to apply a process to bring order to that chaos. So fundamentally, talking about ideas being everywhere, that's a given. We all have them every day. at different points. They could be personal, they could be business, they could be about life, they could be about relationships. What's very difficult is about taking that idea through a process in order to get an output. And that's really where idea management sort of comes into fruition. So if we can have a tailored process that takes an idea from flash to bang, then we can see the actual execution. Now, we can't execute every idea, so we need to understand which ideas we should take forward, and technology and process will allow you to do that. We also need to design different processes for different divisions. So my process in marketing might be different from an operations. My process for a quick win in marketing might be different from a strategic strategic project. And actually, what are the different gates and innovation steps that we need to take in order to take that idea through? So idea management as a collective is a process that allows ideas to flow through an organization across different departments, different geographies, different cultures, and have different processes within each of them based on the type of idea. And those ideas can range from continuous improvements to knowledge-based sharing to disruptive innovation. And these different types of innovations will all follow different pathways. And it's really important that we identify what we're trying to achieve as an organization, because that will help us create a structure that allows us to drive the output. So I'm going to pass back over to Charlie, who's going to talk a little bit more around sort of innovation and some of the barriers that we see that sit around it.
I think we've been in a super privileged position over the last 5 or 6 years in the fact that at our last count we'd spoken to over 1,000 enterprises, and in particular, what barriers do they face when it comes to obtaining innovation? And I think that whenever you're designing a process for the first time or making iterations to the process, it's a really important exercise to identify the barriers that are stopping you being most successful. So the 3 most common barriers that we see, which are almost seen in every one of those enterprises, are silos. And I'll talk about what I mean by that in more detail a little bit later on. But at a high level, silos could be, in terms of innovation, different geographic locations, ideating, but then not permeating out of that location. Likewise, similar with teams. Or it could be things like tools as well. So silos can appear when you use a particular type of tool to capture an idea, for instance, email or suggestion box. The HIPPO, quite a rude term. It's an acronym for the highest paid person's opinion. And effectively what we see time and time again is those that are highest paid tend to have the loudest voice and the budget and resources to get the ideas that they have actioned. But more often than not, they're not at the pain or opportunity points that their colleagues are, so they're not necessarily always implementing the most meaningful innovations. Now the last one, if it doesn't resonate with you, then again, perhaps this is the wrong session. But action and impact are very rare. Ideas are never in short supply, but the ability to qualify the best ones is a difficult thing to do that organizations struggle with. So these are the most common barriers. The bad news is there are many, many, many more. Okay, so I'm not going to read off the sheet here, but rather I'm going to take 30 seconds to just let you absorb what some of these are, and if you have got any way of writing them down, do write them down, because if you're experiencing these problems, you need to think about how you design them out of the process too. When you're doing that, some of the ones that really I personally see a lot, and they always cause me grief, are leadership expecting ROI too fast. So if you're doing something really disruptive, but leadership want to see an immediate profit on it, that's never going to happen. So you need to think about how you socialize frequently in that instance, the experiment back to senior management who are sponsoring it, and just consider what those qualification criteria are for it to get more and more funding, until eventually you do get to that point where they get what they want, which is the ROI, as an example. Okay, well, hopefully you guys have had a chance to read all those there. Yeah, We want to know the barriers. We want to design them out of the process. So finally, on this little package of slides here, most organisations have an operational model that looks like the one on the left when it comes to innovation. They're using multiple tools to collect ideas from multiple stakeholders, and this is where silos really appear in organisations. And a lot of these tools as well miss out on things that good ideation processes thrive on. So, for instance, a lot of those tools you see there aren't particularly collaborative. A lot of those tools there don't allow you to see progress that's happening with the idea. They don't allow you to rate or give opinions on ideas. And most of all, there doesn't seem to be in any of those the ability to automate the best ideas forward. So that's where the most progressive organisations are looking to companies like IdeaDrop for software that goes about replacing all those to give you one neat solution to manage your process through. Effectively, an idea management software facilitates your idea management process.
Thanks, Charlie. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the process, and the process is interesting because Charlie alluded to technology that obviously supports innovation and ideation strategies, but equally process is such an important facet to making this work. We have a number of steps in an innovation plan around our customer successes around how technology is implemented, how customers are onboarded, and why that's important. It's such an important part. So I'm going to talk through those different steps just to give you an idea of the things that you need to start thinking about within your organization in order to drive innovation, or able to have the structure to drive innovation. So strategy, goals, and objectives, equally like most things in life, we need to start with what we're trying to achieve. And this is really, really important in ideation as well. So we need to understand, what is the organization trying to do this year, 3 years, 5 years? And we need to understand that because we need to know what types of ideas that we want to generate. Now, ideas can be random and chaotic, like we've discussed before, but equally they can be focused, and we can focus them by telling people what we want. So if we focus people's minds in terms of the types of ideas and the types of innovations that we're trying to drive, because they help us achieve our organizational strategy and goals, then we're going to drive things that we're much more likely to implement. Much harder to implement an idea that's completely off-piste or something that's not related to what we're trying to achieve as an organization at that time. Now, it might be that we pivot the business because the idea is so amazing, but equally they're more rare, and we want to have a sort of a clear process defined in order to maximize the chance of an idea passing through. So firstly, understand what we're trying to achieve. Groups and categories. Talking about groups and categories, so groups, we refer to groups as groups of people. And innovation is interesting. So the more open innovation is, the more free form it is, the more innovation that you can drive. But equally, it becomes chaotic. And what we need to do is ensure that when ideas are being driven through an organization, they're being driven through a group structure. And we use group structures to decide how things are shared. So it might be shared with the entire organization. It might be shared with my specific division or geographical business area. Or it could be shared across a range of those. And technology allows you to sort of pick and choose where you want to share. And we want to be able to sort of cross-cut those segments as well. So I might sit in a global organization, so I might sit within the UK office and a UK group of people, but equally I might sit in a cross-functional group of specialism around perhaps SEO and marketing. And that SEO and marketing is relevant regardless of which country I sit in, because the same techniques are used in different regions. So it's really around sort of refining how we share and where we get the best information. And categories are the different functional areas within our business, and they will differ depending on the department or the geographical remit or the actual business unit themselves. What we're trying to do within technology is obviously create different buckets, and the more different buckets that we create, the more data points you have, and the more data points you have, the more that you can cut and slice that data to give you detailed insights. So groups and categories really, really allow you to sort of drill down into your organizational structure, substructures, and then pull information to the right people at the right time in order to make decisions. Workflows and statuses. I touched upon this a little bit earlier. This is about sort of a structure and a setup of what it looks like. So we talk a lot about flash to bang, and we've done actually some workshops and webinars actually in flash to bang in the past, but that's really around how do you get an idea from someone's head to execution. And that workflow will change depending on the business, depending on the department that it sits within, potentially the geography, who are the owners of those particular categories or groups of people. And what we do is we set up those workflows, and so we can make sure that those ideas go from flash to bang. or they go from flash to the bin, which is also highly relevant in idea management. Every idea you have isn't a good one, unfortunately, but you need to be able to sort of sift through, and that's what statuses allow you to do. You allow you to put ideas in different buckets and different workflows, so you can see at any one point in time where ideas sit in your organization. Are they under review? Are they in pilot? Have they been archived? Have they been actioned? And what we are able to do then is to drill down into that information and understand what our innovation pipeline looks like. Which innovations are coming through? Which innovations do we expect to execute? What's the expected business benefit of those innovations? And we can start to really sort of monetize and understand the impact that those ideas are driving. Reward and recognition, really interesting one. So reward and recognition, not new, but actually it's a two-way street within innovation. So I have an idea as an employee. Why should I share it with an organization? Now I want to share because I want my voice to be heard. But equally, does my idea have a practical application within the business that will help us commercially or structurally? What we find actually is recognition is still probably by far the most important driver, but rewards can obviously be put in to incentivize participation and reward ideas that get actions and may have a fairly large financial benefit to a business. But it's really about understanding what you're trying to do, and those reward and recognition structures and strategies should change per group. So if I'm in a more entry-level position versus maybe on the board of directors, that will change in terms of what's driving me. Is it a career-based decision? Am I looking to get acknowledged by my managers or my managers' managers? Am I looking for a gift voucher? Am I looking for an early finish? So it's really trying to understand the intrinsic motivations that sit behind the groups that you're targeting or speaking to and designing a process specifically for them. Challenge extraction, so co-authoring across key stakeholders, really interesting point, and links back to the strategy goals and objectives. So we go to the senior organizational leadership and we say, what is it you're trying to achieve as a business this year, next 3 years, 5 years? What are your strategy plans? And what we then want to do is actually, what are the key challenges that those individuals face in executing against that strategy? That allows us to create challenges, and then those challenges can be dropped to the groups that we've obviously predefined, and we generate ideas around key strategic challenges that we have. Really helpful in two ways. One, if we're generating ideas around key strategic challenges, the chances are those ideas will get implemented because there's already a clear route and obviously a reason to do it. And also it helps really focus the mind of the employees on what we're saying is actually we're educating an organization on the types of ideas that you want to generate. Probably one of the most important things that we do in launching a platform or any kind of innovation management program, regardless of technology, is really extracting that information from the senior leaders so we can get ideas and we can action them. So that's a critical point. Some of the more tactical elements of an idea management process, the execution of internal comms. Again, launching things like this is really important. It's not just about, can we have your ideas, please? For most organizations, this is quite a large step change. It's about change management as well. It's about saying, we're really interested in what you have to say within your organization. We want to hear your voice, and we'll listen to your voice, and we'll reward and recognize you appropriately. And that's about a continuous comms plan that sort of backs up that message. It should be coming from the senior leadership team because it's really them that are driving it, and they need to be responsible for execution of those ideas. So how do we create innovation champions, evangelists? How do we use videos? How do we use internal comms channels? How do we use posters, mugs, flags, whatever it might be? Really, really important to communicate what you're trying to do and keep communicating and keep celebrating the success that you drive from the program, because that's what will really refocus and reinvigorate an innovation management process is the continuous feedback loop. Analytics and reporting, fairly self-explanatory, but very, very important to understand what we're actually driving, what are the ideas doing, which ones are making it through the process, what's the impact of those ideas, is it monetary, is it process, is it employee well-being, what does that mean, and actually what's the purpose? So ideas, like we've talked about before, are everywhere. It's the practical application and execution of those ideas that has value. So we need to measure the value, and then we need to celebrate that value and push it back into the process, because that's what will continue the circle. If we don't understand the value that we're getting, then we'll stop to do it, like anything in life. Idea evaluation, touched upon that very little in analytics and reporting, but that's really about what are the ideas doing, because we want to be able to show a clear ROI in an innovation management process. That's why we're doing it. We're looking at ways in which we improve our individuals and our organizations. And finally, reporting back to the business, fairly obvious step again, but this is really about ensuring that people know the value that is being driven, because that will sort of help facilitate the renewed communications plan, the reward and recognition structure, and this continuous sort of aspect of points that I've covered should be continually looked at, because it's not about just generating ideas in a week or a month or a year. This is about changing a culture of our organization and driving it over a long period of time to drive the best process or the best organizational structure that you can have. Sorry for a very long-winded explanation of a few points, but it just hopefully goes to show as to how important the process within idea management is. And I'm going to pass back to Charlie.
Can you believe that 26% of CEOs still believe that strong visionary business leadership is the most important ingredient for a successful innovation in a company? I can. I see it as the single most important thing. If you are a visionary, then people have a direction in which they follow and they trust in. But a vision is nothing without ideas. And great CEOs recognize and understand that, and great leadership recognizes and understands that. And so Johnny just touched on quite a few times in that last narrative there around the process, leaders' involvement in innovation. Now, to us, it's the most important thing for you getting tangible results at the end. And these three reasons here on the slides are very simple, but they're very important. You need a top-level sponsor who has challenges that they face in achieving their strategic goals, but the good news is they recognize that and they've got budget and resource to solve those challenges. The only thing that they don't have are decent creative ideas that allow them to do it. So we need them. Now, their job in this idea management process is to keep broadcasting out to the entire organization, or the parts of it with the skills that they need to utilize, challenges that inspire people to contribute those ideas, so that leader can have actual tangible ideas that they can carry forward to start to impact what's strategically important to them and their organization. So the more senior that person is, and the more their objective relies on ideas, and the more budget they have to invest in ideas, the better they are as a sponsor. Now, below that, you're going to need other leaders. And so the next row down, should we say that person usually belongs on C-suite? The next layer down from that, they're normally department heads. They are the people that report up to the exec on strategic initiatives that they're responsible for delivering and are measured against. So we need these people to, on a periodic basis, depending on the size of your organization, these people might be broadcasting challenges weekly, it might be monthly, but they are the generals, the day-to-day generals that make sure that the crowd are making meaningful contributions to the senior leadership that they can carry forward an action with the hope and also strong knowledge, if the process is good, that those ideas are going to deliver a measurable impact. And then the final thing when it comes to assigning leadership roles around an idea management process is that you can have a layer below that too. So these heads will have topics that they are interested in innovating around. So for instance, if you're an HR manager, you might report to the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer. They're that one on the left, the top level. Now, as the HR manager, I might have 4 topics of interest that I'm really keen to get people's contributions on. Might be engagement, might be attrition, it might be productivity, and it might be health and well-being. And each of those topics will normally have someone fascinated in them in the organization that's a strong influencer, that understands the procurement processes, that has project management skills. Now, these are what we call topic matter experts, and they are critical to your process. So if you implement these 3 layers of senior people in your process and define their roles similar to how we've done here, this will be the single most important thing to gaining ideas that make a difference within your organization. Now, how do I know that? Because here are just some of the companies that we work with. They are global, you can see they're sector agnostic, and what we're trying to show here is that anyone, any organization can generate power from innovation, and power being ultimately profit, or if you're a charitable organization, however you manage that impact in saving lives or reducing people's mental health symptoms, or whatever that charitable goal or aim is.
Good. Just touching upon, and Charlie sort of alluded to this sort of the range of different organisations that we work with across a multitude of sectors, and sizes. I think it's probably important to mention as well. Some of our smaller clients, probably city law firms, maybe 150 people, like Taylor Vinters, all the way through to business like Ericsson, supporting their global innovation program with 100,000 staff. So innovation and idea management is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a small, medium, or global organisation. There's immediate application for all these businesses, and we'll all extract value in different ways. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the case studies, because this will hopefully bring it to life and showcase some of the things that you might expect to achieve by using an idea management process and software. I'll touch upon Covéa Insurance. They're a French insurance business, but specifically within their UK division, in which Idea Drop was rolled out. So I think what's really interesting, the idea, and what I say to people when I talk about Covéa Insurance or this particular idea, is that Idea Drop don't create the ideas. We didn't create it. This idea already existed, but it existed within the mind of someone that didn't have the ability to share. And they might have shared it, and they may have shared it in the past, but what we see in organizations is employees that have ideas might tell their colleagues, might tell their managers. Their managers might go, that's a great idea, and they might tell their manager who thinks it's a good idea, and they might tell their manager. But you can see the kind of the number of steps that things need to go through in order to get someone that can do something about it. We're all extremely busy people in organizations, so we hear ideas, we go, that's a great idea, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know where to go. I just want to get on with my day job because people aren't measuring me. That's what technology really helps you do, is allow those ideas to go into an ecosystem and let the crowd sort of validate those ideas and actually push them in front of the people that can make a difference. And that's where the process is really, really important. So just alluding a little bit as to how software supports here. So the idea itself, really, really interesting one. So Covéa Insurance was an insurance business, as I've mentioned, specifically in their call center. One of the call center operatives had an idea saying, probably around 25% of the calls that I get on a daily basis are things that I believe that could probably be handled by a machine or a bot. Really, really simple queries. Very simple for the call operative to answer. And I thought, actually, could we automate this process? If we can automate this process, then that gives me 25% of my time back. Now, that's not about time to do other things. That's about time to spend with customers that have more complex queries. So Covéa Insurance had longer wait times, and obviously that has an impact on lots of different parts of the business, whether that's retention, their customer services, their success, and finance if customers drop off because they're unhappy. Lots of different ways in which you can see how that can impact. So the idea was, actually, could we implement a bot that will sort of pick up these types of calls, these 25% of calls that we believe could be automated? They ran a quick pilot, and within 4 weeks, they resoundingly said, absolutely, yes, we can. So that was deployed across Covéa Insurance in the UK, and they attributed a 2.5 million cost saving in handling repetitive inquiries over a multi-year period. That's fascinating. So that's just a singular idea from a single person that had a cost saving of £2.5 million. I think it was over a 5-year period that they estimated it. The cost of the technology was negligible. The call center staff were happier because they were stopping to deal with less repetitive queries. They obviously reduced the wait times. They had a higher customer satisfaction score as a result. So the monetary impact is just almost a sub-benefit of what they've achieved. But it just goes to show how that idea impacts multiple different parts of the organization, not just the individual, not just the customer call center, also their customers, also the management team, also finance, who obviously can attribute those cost savings. So hopefully a really interesting example of just a simple idea that can make a big impact. Take a completely different industry, so Kent Police. We do quite a lot of work actually within UK public sector across particularly blue lights, but pulled out Kent Police here, one of our sort of long-standing customers. Just reading through the stats very quickly, you can see 7.7 million saving, and that's just across 3 ideas. So this is about making operational policing efficiencies. Some of the really interesting stats, though, dropped over 1,000 ideas for a few year period. I mean, these stats are a little outdated now in terms of where they are now. But interesting, about 40% of those ideas were implemented. That's extremely high. Typically, in a private sector organisation, we'd expect it to be 10 to 15% of ideas that are actioned. But it just goes to show you the amount of impact that Kent Police have been able to drive. But a lot of those ideas are simple, quick wins that make life easier. And the Chief Constable, Alan Pewsley, is usually behind this programme, so has made it a sort of a personal mission to make sure that he's improving the lives of officers, as well as looking at ways in which they can, of course, save money as a force, which has knock-on impacts to their funding, the public at large. Not going to go into those specific ideas, but there are many, and obviously we have white papers that sort of dig into the details of these. But just wanted to sort of share a sort of a commercial and a public sector example. So these are perhaps more sort of continuous improvement based innovations, but there are many others. So I'm just going to pass back to Charlie.
However, we believe in giving value wherever we can. We have our own goal to become synonymous with innovation as an organisation and to be thought leaders on the topic. And so in order to be true to that vision that we have for ourselves, we want to offer anyone who is on the webinar today to complete our free innovation audit. It's actually normally worth £2,500. We send you a short survey. It's 8 statements. It will take you roughly about 10 minutes to fill it out. You don't need to write anything. You just need to score your proficiency in these 8 statements. And then following that, one of our innovation consultants will have a 1-hour long call with you to understand why you gave the scores you did against those statements. As they're going through that and understanding the why, on the call they'll offer some immediate remedies and recommendations if they think that they're poignant. But following the call, what they'll do is they'll write up a full report capturing why you scored what you did, and then writing up recommendations which will be supported by all sorts of interesting resources that we've produced over the years that will help you attain higher scores in those disciplines in the future. So it's enormously helpful. All of our clients will always go through this. That's because that we believe that it's a great tool for our customer success team who take the innovation audit. If you become a client and they use that to help them design idea drop into your organization, knowing what your proficiency is in certain disciplines. So we'd love to do that with all of you. If that sounds good, do reach out to us afterwards. Thank you ever so much from both Johnny and I, and now we're excited to answer your questions.